He goes, my name is Joe, and I'm from the IRS. Oh, what? Well, you know, the bankrupt company that you bought it from has close to, it was $750,000 in IRS obligations.
Were you aware of this when you did due diligence?
Hell no. So I go, how is that possible? It's bankrupt. Well, it was payroll taxes. I sat down and said, okay, Joe, I hear you. Let me call my attorney, who I paid close to $1 million to. And I called him and I said, how's your D&O insurance?
Oh. I'm here in Dallas with Deb Purvin. Deb, thank you for being here. I usually don't read an introduction, but your bio over the past 3+ decades is very extensive. I want to make sure I get it right.
Okay.
In short, you are a founder, a banker, an educator, and an operator. You're a 2-time founder who scaled companies past the $100 million mark and successfully exited, not without hills and valleys. So that'll be interesting to hear the wins and the losses and how you overcame them. Again, a former banker, being a senior VP and Dallas market manager at major banks, including Citibank. So you have a lot of experience with businesses from that perspective. You're an educator in that you're a faculty for Goldman Sachs's 10,000 Small Businesses program. Currently, combining your educator and founder hats, you're a founder of Business Owners MBA, based here in Dallas. Bomba is an accelerator that helps business owners between $500,000 and $5 million in revenue master their numbers, scale profitability, and escape what you call the messy middle.
I do.
Okay? And several of your clients of Bomba have landed in the Inc. 5000 list. I think a couple of them, the top 100.
Yep.
Many have doubled both the top and bottom lines. And if that wasn't enough, you're also an accomplished sports woman, being a former member of the U.S. ski team.
Yep.
Wow. And you currently live on your sailboat half of the year, correct?
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Oh, wow. So you bring over 30 years of financial experience. You're on a mission to help business owners not just scale, but actually love their business again. So I want to get into Bomba, and I want to get into your $200 million plus exits and the work you're doing with Goldman Sachs and teaching. But before we do that, maybe talk a little bit about your background, your upbringing, and how it impacted you as a founder and operator.
I was named to the U.S. ski team at 13. So I left home. And I was one of the youngest ones on the team. And so I raised myself. I watched what everyone was doing. So I was very much an observer of human behavior. I found people incredibly interesting. And we were traveling the world. So it was really an interesting growing up experience. And my parents, we didn't have any of these electronic tracking devices, ways to keep track or even talk to anyone. So, for example, we were in France training in the fall for the World Cup series that was going to start. And I had to go take my SATs because I wanted to go to college. My coach put me on a train and said, go that way. And I was registered in Munich. There's a big army base in Munich.
You speak the language? Or?
Hell no. He put me on the train, and I had to change trains. And I changed trains, but I went the wrong way. So as the train came into Yugoslavia, they had to see our passports and the right to enter. And I was like, oh, I'm going the wrong way. So I threw my backpack out the window, and I jumped out the window because I didn't know how to confront this problem that I'm on the wrong train. And I've got a deadline. I have to be there on Saturday morning, and this is Friday. So I get back, and I'm sitting at the way station, and I got on the train that came going the other way. And I did end up in Munich. I get the signals. But so I get on my plane, I get home, they pick me up at the airport. I get into the hotel where the ski team was staying, and I have a telegram from my family telling me I was accepted early decision to Dartmouth, which meant I didn't need that entire adventure.
Wow. Okay.
Why couldn't you have sent this on Thursday?
So the jumping out of the window and getting it done no matter what, that's a common trait in people who are in sports, because no matter how you're feeling or what the condition is, you get it done.
We're goal-oriented.
Very much.
This is where I have to be, and this is when I have to be there.
What do you think elite sports taught you about business discipline?
Oh, important, critical. When I was in banking and hiring people, I always look for someone, an athlete, because you learn discipline, you learn goal setting, you learn disappointments, you learn that you have to keep working on it. You don't do it once or twice. You have to do it 10,000 times or something stupid like that. It's just a focus on accomplishing what you set out to accomplish. And it's not even, my dad always told me, just worry about the next race. Don't worry about if you win this. It's just the next race. How do you perform your best? And I think that's just a key ingredient in being successful.
It almost comes down to not only discipline and getting to the next goal, but also being focused and not being distracted by the next shiny thing,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And so how do you advise companies who come to you, because that's a tough thing to do, right? To tell someone, hey, focus.
Now, when I'm working with companies, most of the time I'm working with them, whether it's the accelerator or my one-on-one clients, we meet regularly, and that's the accountability part. They know that this is what they owe me in 2 weeks. Preference would be that they work on it over the 2-week period so that it becomes something that they're doing on a regular basis, not just, oh God, I have to meet with my coach. But the goal for me is to get them to understand these are the steps that you have to take in order to be successful in your business, to be more profitable, to be able to scale. And so these are things that you're going to learn and I'm going to coach you on, but then you're going to indoctrinate into your business the way you're going to go forward and run your business. Yeah, there are a lot of shiny objects. I know I'm not immune to shiny objects, but by working with a coach, not just me, any coach, it does make you focus and it does give you that accountability, which as a founder is hard because you really don't have people holding you accountable.
There has to be times when the shiny object is worth pursuing. And how do you know when that's the case?
That's a really good question. You don't. That's one of the things about being a founder and being an entrepreneur, right? You think you can do the same thing that everybody else is doing differently and better. So by definition, that's a shiny object. It's something that's beyond what's going on now. So what makes the value of my coaching so much more than the value of someone else's? And by definition, that's something new, that's something different. It's something maybe it's not all that different, but you're communicating it differently. So it's a lot of experimentation and you have to be willing to step out of that comfort zone and try it. And then we set parameters. So if you're going to hire someone or you're going to chase that shiny object, what is the goal? What is the time frame? What's success and what's failure?
Okay.
So that we have some parameters, because when you get in there, then you have at least some idea of what that is going to look like. If we hit this goal, we'll keep going. If we don't hit this goal, we call it the end. Now we may hit that number and go, let's give it a little more time because we see success. A lot of people just jump in and they give up too soon, or they never give up. So I think it's really important. I tell everyone, I give the same advice in hiring someone. What do you want them to do? And where's the value that they're bringing to your company? And how long are you going to put up with supporting them until they hit that goal? And, oh, I'm going to hire an operations manager, right? And that operations manager is going to free up 10 hours of my time every week. So what are you going to do with that? Are you going to go play soccer with your kids? Fine. All 10 hours, maybe 3 hours. 7 hours you need to spend doing something that moves the business forward. And so that's a perfectly good goal. But if you're going to just be micromanaging the operating team, then that's not worth your time because you're not paying them for anything that's value add.
And this is all based on, obviously, you've exited $200 million plus companies. How many clients that come to you or companies that come to you are scaling when they really should be building that back-end operation?
So the smaller companies,
Define smaller.
$500,000 to $2 million.
Okay.
Those companies are usually, it's more a definition around the number of people that work for them. Because the founder grows the company by telling the people that work for her what to do. And then they hit a point where they are stuck because they don't have time to move forward because they're still teaching everyone what to do. That is a time I see a lot of companies because now they have to build the foundation to be able to grow again. And it's usually not the people that they've been telling how to do their jobs. Like me, and my daughter does my marketing. She's good at what she does for me, but she's not out there in the marketing world looking at other things. So you have to go, okay, who is actually doing their job without your supervision and can stand alone? And who do you need to replace with someone with professional knowledge?
Okay.
And so that's a really tough transition. And the founder has to decide, do I want to be the electrician, doctor, lawyer, accountant? Do I want to be the professional performing the service, or do I want to run a group of people doing that?
So $500,000 to $2 million is where things break or get stuck.
Yeah.
Is there also like a head count? Some industries have higher revenue streams with less people. Is there a head count number?
Usually somewhere between 7 and 12. Yeah,
Okay.
because the HR quotes are you can manage 10 people. I've never been able. The most I could manage was 7. So that's where things start to break. And they don't really break. It's just your revenue doesn't increase and you start finding that your margins are getting squeezed. So you're like, I've been $1 million for the last 3 years, and instead of making $400,000, I'm making $200,000.
What's the most expensive mistake you've ever made as a founder? And how did you fix it?
I made so many expensive mistakes. Decisions I've made, the most expensive was when I owed $82 million on 8 shopping centers that I had built, and all the banks in Texas went under in the late 80s. And when the banks go under, they call your loans. And when they call your loans, there's no place to refinance because all the banks have gone under. So you're like, this sort of is bad news. I don't know what to do. And because it was such a monumental disruption to everything that was going on in Texas, both real estate and oil and gas, the banks went under. They had no capital because the properties were not valued at what they had initially been lent on. And so the Fed stepped in and they brought other big banks into Texas and said, you have to buy these portfolios or you have to take over these banks. And so I had real estate. A lot of lenders are like, I don't like retail. I was mostly retail. So my portfolio was spread around banks and savings and loans. The banks were doing the construction loans, the savings and loans were doing the longer term. And so I was very fortunate that all of my properties rolled up into one bank. And so I sat down with the banker and I said, look, I have 8 retail properties. 6 of them are cash flowing or break even. 1 is under construction and 1's in lease up. And I am going to pay you off, but you've got to support me during the next couple of years. Because what was happening is people were buying these real estate properties for nothing. 10 cents on a dollar, and the banks go and get rid of them. We've got the RTC supporting us. They'll pay us money. We don't need to worry about the economic value of these properties. And so I was like, I do, because I need to wait until it's worth more than my loan. And so they were like, if you're going to stick with it, we'll stick with it. I was the only developer they had in their entire portfolio who paid them back.
That's amazing. And it's astounding because you hear stories like this, and when clients come to me with not that large of a situation, that's a black swan event. Right?
It is. Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, which you've lived through several black swan events. And it seems like the past 2 decades alone have had several. But the S&L crisis was definitely top among them. But clients who come to me and they're like, what do I do? Have you called them?
Yeah.
Have you called your lenders? Because it's the ones who work it out and communicate can't run from this problem.
No.
Because they're just going to call collateral, they're going to foreclose, they're going to do what they need to do because they have to protect their shareholders. So working out problems like that is key. But having that hindsight, was there anything you could have done? What kind of cushion could you have done to minimize your exposure?
Yeah, I don't know that anyone had hindsight to that coming. We knew it was happening. We knew that they were inflating the value, the land values, and we could see the disruption to the marketplace. Same thing with the next crisis, the next housing bubble that happened in the 2000s. You could see it coming, but you just couldn't see what was going to blow up. How long is this bubble going to last? And I thought, I've put equity in my properties, they're cash flowing. It's worse than what I just said, though, because you realize if the bank forgives your debt, that's income. And now the IRS comes to get you.
Forgiveness income. Yeah.
So
It's
I'm
like, surprise, here's a letter from the IRS.
Yeah. It's just, the whole thing was just a series of dominoes that I don't know how you could prepare for. For me, I was prepared because I was a lender before, so I knew what lender parameters look like. And I made the mistake of investing when I sold 1 or 2 properties to get into bigger opportunities. I made the mistake of reinvesting all my equity. So I was very heavily, I wasn't asking the banks for big loans, 90%. I was 70, 75 maybe, and I had anchor tenants lined up. So I had a really great package to give my lender. So I thought, well, I've got all this equity in there, how bad can it get? So I thought I had protected myself. And I tell people, when I sold all the pieces of property, the goal was to have a nice portfolio of retail and to live on that, and that's my legacy, and then we can go off doing something else because we've got this great income stream. And obviously that wasn't going to be the long-term plan anymore, so we sold off properties and paid back the bank. I tell people I made money. I went sailing. I'm not sure I made back all my equity, but I survived. So I got a nice, 7 or 8 year lesson in real estate economics and cash flow and negotiation. Then I fled.
You're like, bye, we'll see you later. Finishing that out though, do you feel like what you should have kept, instead of putting more equity into it, because you could have achieved the loan or obtained the loans without putting that much equity, you should have put like profit first. You take some money out, you put it in the bank, you leverage a bit, maybe you put down 10% or 15%, but then the remainder is saved away. Do you think that would have helped cushion you through that storm?
I coach that now.
Okay.
That's absolutely, I tell people, build your wealth at the same time you build your business. Do I think that would have helped me in that situation? No. I think that if I had put some dollars on the side, the bank would have said, you're not broke yet. We want it all. We moved on to a sailboat. And so I told my attorney, I said, here's the affidavit if anyone comes after me. Now, I was down to one lender, so I wasn't too worried about it, but there might have been a note. It was such a free-for-all. There might have been something somewhere I had forgotten about, some line of credit that I used to hold a piece of property. I live in 400 square feet. I do not have electricity. I do not have a phone. I do not have running water. So you tell them that I have given them everything I own. There is nothing left except for waiting till we get through this period of time and I can sell the property. My attorneys, are you sure I can tell them that? And I said, absolutely. Just don't tell them it's a sailboat.
Sounds better.
That never crossed anybody's mind. So,
Okay.
So it was a good ploy.
So you weathered the storm on a sailboat.
Literally.
And waited for the storm to pass. And
I went back to work. I was monitoring my real estate and I was working for banks in lending, and still until all of it could be unwound. Yeah.
So do you think that debt is dangerous?
No.
Or is it just that some founders at that point where they find themselves in a upside down, maybe they were financially illiterate, or a situation happens like what you went through? What do you think about debt, leverage?
Debt is critical to scaling because you could borrow, in theory, you could borrow 3 times your equity or 3 times your EBITDA, whether it's balance sheet or cash flow lending. But here's the thing, they borrow, but they don't pay attention to paying it back. So back to the sports analogy, you have to be disciplined. You have to understand, if I'm getting a $5 million working capital line of credit, a line of credit is for working capital. So when you complete a job that took 60 days and you paid all your labor and you paid all your vendors, and then you take 60 days to collect, right, on your invoice, you are now funding that customer 120 days. So when that customer pays you, you need to think about repaying that line of credit. I use this amount of money to make that possible. Now, that's a very linear way of thinking about it, but what happens is you get to that point, you have more cash, now you go, I'll just go out and do something with it. Oh, look, I got this big payment. And so people don't pay attention to being disciplined, and that gets them in trouble. And you have to understand how to use debt properly. Now, remember I just told you I was in default on $82 million? Right. You may go, maybe she doesn't really know what she's talking about.
No, I don't think anyone would say that, especially how you navigated it and got out of it. So debt is essentially a strategic tool.
Absolutely.
You lose it to unlock more revenue.
Absolutely.
But it's what you do with that revenue that dictates whether you can get more debt in the future.
So I tell people you should never use debt for operating losses.
Okay.
Okay? And that's what I had at my resort. I was in big time trouble at my resort because I was using
the second
business.
Right.
Because I was using so my banker that I paid back had said, if you ever want to borrow again, come talk to me. And I said, if I ever come talk to you, just shoot me. I don't want to do that again. And so when I had the opportunity to buy this resort out of bankruptcy in Vermont, it seemed like a culmination of all the things I'd done. It was a ski resort. It was an operating entity with the ski and the golf course. It was real estate. We get to build townhouses and hotels. And it had 2,000 permits because they were grandfathered permits. And before we bought it, we had a long discussion with the permitting authority about there are like 18 different requirements. And they said, you are grandfathered for all the ones that are external to the property, like traffic and environmental, but then you have to get permitted for site specific, which made sense, right? So we were like, yeah, we got 2,000 units. I knew we'd never get permits for 2,000 units, but I figured even 1,000 units would be a gigantic development in Vermont. And it's a beautiful ski area and golf course and designed by a well-known golf designer, and was too good to pass up. So my banker said, go to Boston and talk to the loan production officer that I have there. So I walk in, and I swear to God, the guy there was 12. And I don't want to know who you are or what you did, but I don't ever want to get a call from the vice chairman now. I don't want to ever get a call from the vice chairman telling me to give you anything you asked for. And I'm like, stop it. I paid him back $82 million. I deserve it. I said, so what's his loan limit? He goes, $100 million. I go, that's perfect. That's just what I needed. So
What a coincidence.
how did that happen? Literally, we're talking about operating losses. So we buy the resort, and it has a little office building that was a converted home at the base. And we're literally the first day in the office. My kids have their own offices because I homeschooled them, and my husband was running the construction crew. And the first guy who walks, his name also was Joe, very imprinted in my brain. I go, our first guest, I'm so excited, welcome, come on in, I'm all excited, right? And he goes, my name is Joe, and I'm from the IRS. I was like, what? You know, the bankrupt company that you bought it from has $750,000 in IRS obligations.
Were you aware of this when you did due diligence?
Hell no. So I go, how is that possible? It's bankrupt. It was payroll. Payroll taxes are not. And so after he left, after I sat down and said, okay, Joe, I hear you. Let me call my attorney, who I've paid close to $1 million to. And I called him and I said, how's your D&O insurance?
Oh my
He
goodness.
covered half of it. I don't know what negotiation he had, but they covered half of it, and I covered the other half over a period of time. And I am absolutely convinced. The number was really like less than $100,000, but because it'd been
Penalties and
6
fines.
years or it was ridiculous. I'm like, can't we negotiate? I am absolutely certain Joe put most of that in his pocket.
Wow.
No doubt in my mind. Don't let the IRS hear me say that. I don't want them coming after me. It's just, it was like, really? That was the first bombshell. There were others. But so that was something that now I had to cover with my cash, with my loan, because I hadn't anticipated it. And that's where you get in trouble, because I was obviously borrowing to build, to renovate the golf course and the ski area, but I wasn't borrowing for something that I couldn't repay with the assets.
Did you have revenue coming in at this time, or was it shut down and
Yeah,
you were?
done.
Yeah. So everything's going out.
Yeah, for a long time.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize, they think they buy something out of bankruptcy and everything's discharged, but there's non-dischargeable obligations, one of which is sales tax, obviously employment taxes, all kinds of governmental fees and federal and state, and
Yeah.
then the penalties and interest really glom on.
Yeah, and looking back, I just think how lucky I was it wasn't more. $1 million in a $100 million loan, or who knows how to value the asset at that point. I certainly didn't pay that much for it. So.
Yeah, you know what, 6 figures is 6 figures. So just finishing out the revenue discussion, because you talked a lot about debt and strategic debt and leverage. What is the biggest lie entrepreneurs tell themselves about revenue?
That's a good question. So I have 2 answers. When I work with my clients and we talk about projections, when I want business owners to have a budget for the next year, and they're always like 5%, 10% growth. And I'm like, no, that's not good enough. You have got to grow faster. And then I say, hey, you're $1 million business. What do you want to be in 5 years? I want to be $10 million. And you're like, okay. Then you can't grow 200 grand a year. So let's work backwards. So you have to do, let's grow 50% this year. How are you going to do that? And all of that, all your financials and all of your numbers are lagging indicators. What the hardest thing to do is to get business owners to think about leading indicators. How do you get there, right? How do you go from $1 million to $2 million in a year? Where did you get new revenue? There are 3 ways to grow your business: new revenue, increase your prices, and upsell your clients. And so how are you going to do that? I suggest you do all 3 of those, right? And so there's a lot of friction on increasing prices. Yes. Oh, I can't do that. And it's like, why not? 20% of your clients provide 80% of your revenues. 60% of your clients are break even. That means you're just practicing. You are not making any money.
Treading water, essentially.
And 20% are below the line. They are unprofitable. So the first thing you need to do is get all of your clients profitable. And the nice thing about the break-evens, forget the unprofitable ones. Those either get lost or you double whatever you're charging them and they pay it, which happens because they usually know they're way below market. But the ones in the middle, those break-even ones, all you have to do is increase your price a little bit and it falls to the bottom line. So you don't have to do anything different to have a bottom line profit. And once you have a bottom line profit, now you have the resources to go out and prospect and to get some additional revenue, additional clients.
It feeds itself, and it sounds so simple, but it is. I've seen so many business owners be trepidatious, like, I can't raise prices.
Yeah.
And if you haven't raised prices in 5 years, why can't you raise prices?
Yeah.
And not to mention you're below market. That is absolutely.
When you say raise prices, everyone goes, you think on everybody. Look at what's happening now with pricing. Your airline ticket, your seat right there is a whole different price than mine. There's so much more you can do now with your pricing structure. Start with the guy you don't like, raise his prices. And you have to raise them until someone says, I can't do that. That's too much. And then you back down and say, oh, you're a good client. Just warning you, I'm going to have to raise them again in a year or 2. Okay, now you've backed down, but now you found the ceiling. And then you have to do the same thing. And so it doesn't need to be across the board. If you just say every month, I'm going to raise somebody's prices, you could start seeing where in the market you belong, because most businesses, they price on cost. It costs this and I'm going to double it, or it costs this and I'm going to increase by 50%. They don't cost on value. They don't price on value. And finding value is really hard. I have a great story that I tell in my presentation tomorrow. So the first set of townhouses I built in my little resort, they cost me about $200,000. And my bank wanted a release price of $250,000. So the bank says, we'll lend you this for this project. Obviously, I had tranches in my bank loan. And so this was for this project. It was 72 units. And the first 12 I built were on the 10th hole, and it overlooked the clubhouse and the mountain. The ski mountain was in the background. And I bought the first one. And so I said, okay, nothing in my valley. We're talking about a beautiful valley full of bed and breakfasts and a big lake. And so it's really quintessential Vermont, okay? Nothing in my area had sold for $250,000. Wow. And I'm like, okay, but we're new. No one had built anything new that was for sale. People had built nice homes there for a lot more. But I thought, we're just going to sell it for $300,000, okay? And we sold all 12 of them in a month. They disappeared. And I was like, that was good. And then the next year I built 24, because we built them in groups of 4, and they were rows up the mountain. And my broker comes in to me and she goes, I have good news and bad news. And I'll go, okay, spit it out. I go, I want the bad news first. And she goes, of the 12 you sold, 10 of them have resold. And I'm like, that sucks. I'm trying to create this beautiful family community where families can come and spend time. We're talking about New Yorkers and people from New Jersey and Connecticut and Massachusetts, where their weekend to spend with their kids is valuable time, and I want to create that market for them, right? And they sold it. I had these great families buying my units, and they sold. And she goes, so that's the good news. And I go, okay, what's that? She says, they sold for $400,000.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, wow, I left $1 million.
Table. Wow.
But that's the value part. I'm thinking local. So 2 mistakes. One, they weren't thinking about buying my house. They were comparing it to Killington. Where else can we take the kids to have this resort? Killington was selling their stuff for $700,000. I was a bargain. And I was an hour closer to where they lived. Okay? So I missed my market entirely, number one. And number two, I should have sold them in groups of 4. The first 3 sell, raise the price, you moron. Yeah.
You learned that lesson early on, and I'm sure
I
you
did.
raised prices following that, right? 400, 450.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's again, you don't know. And we've created something new, but it's not new. Killington was there. You just have to really be willing to experiment on that value proposition.
Yeah, it's almost mark to market on a regular basis. You're constantly testing and seeing where you are. Myopic, because like you said, you were just looking at the local market and didn't appreciate there's this broader population. I mean, it's the Northeast. People drive, no one stays in the city.
Oh.
Yeah, but hindsight's 2020.
My husband's always like, yeah, that's that Harvard Dartmouth education.
They didn't do a
I'm like,
case study on this one?
They didn't teach you common sense.
Gosh.
I'm like, where were you when I was fretting over 300,000? But the great thing about what happened is that because I had, as I said, I had a bunch of operating losses. When I went to 400,000, the bank didn't know. And so I was now making $1.5 million, which was covering my operating losses from my release provision. Because I'm selling it for 4, I have to pay the bank $250. So now I have some real money that I can start repaying some debt that I shouldn't have had.
So I want to go now to Bomba, and not Bomba specifically, but what you call the messy middle. And you focus on helping coach founders and executives who are in the $500,000 to $5 million range. And you could be counseling Fortune 500 companies, you could be for $100 million company. Why do you focus on that range?
Because we lose 82% of our small businesses. They fail because they don't understand cash flow. And that's a horrible number. The small business is the backbone of our country. And there's no place to learn financials. Nothing. It's a huge problem. You have a lot of people working on startups. There are all kinds of startup communities. And there are a ton of people who teach how to run corporations. A standard MBA is all about, oh, you want to know something about human resources, it's called human resources, not how this is how you hire, this is how you fire, this is how you hold people accountable. So there's this huge mass of people that have risked their home equity, their 401k, they risk everything to go into business. And they're successful up to a point. And that's the point we were talking about before, where they don't know how to get out of their own way. Mm-hmm. And they've been successful because they have, whether they're professional or a service company or a manufacturing, they've found something in the market that proves there's a market for what they're doing, okay? So I don't want to be in the shiny object startups because those don't really count. Those are hard, but when they've proven, when they've been around for 3 or 4 years, that's where they get stuck and they get frustrated because they've exhausted all of their own ideas. And they have people who are not really bringing them new ideas. They have people who are following their direction that work for them. And so that's where they're stuck. And with just a few ideas like the ones we're talking about and learning their numbers so they can make those decisions based on facts rather than based on gut, they just take off because now they have the equations. Like, how do I hire someone? What are you going to hire them to do? What's the value to your company? What's the trade-off? And what makes them work? Now they have a framework and they get a loan so they can afford it. I had a client who, she was pretty wealthy and she had a promotional company. They put your names on things. And she did a lot in the retail industry. Hilton wants a bunch of bags with their name on it, or they want their name put on their water bottle. And so she would do RFPs for those and get huge orders, Christmas bags. Everybody in the promotional business calls the same vendors, usually in China, and they get prices. This client would call them, and the guy would always price it at 5 or 10% less because she would always pay him cash up front. Now, she had cash up front because she was very wealthy, but that didn't show up on her financial statement. So I told her, I said, we're going to stop doing that because when you go to RFPs, the first thing that the person issuing the RFP does is they look to see if you have a line of credit. If you don't have a line of credit, you get rejected because they want to know that you can carry this obligation to fulfillment. You have the money available to pay. They don't ask you, are you personally wealthy? You have a big bank account. And so I told her, I said, I'm going to give you $1 million loan and I'm not going to have you pay for it. You don't have to pay me the upfront fee. But when you use it, I'm going to charge you, instead of prime plus 1, I'm going to charge you prime plus 3. And I make you pay 2 points when you use it. I said, just put $1 million down there. And so, of course, she was always complaining, I never get $1 million orders. And I was, that's, you don't have a line of credit. And so she got two $2 million orders.
Wow.
So she comes in, literally 90 days later, she comes in and goes, okay,
Eyes are open. Yeah.
I not only
Let's
need
talk.
to pay you, but I need an increase.
Yeah.
And so that's the
Wow.
power of having those resources available to you. And so that messy middle, they're afraid. And they're afraid because they don't understand their cash flow. And they're afraid because they don't understand the power of having additional resources available to them. And it's frustrating because they've created something that gives it to them. It's right here. You're sitting on it and you can't see it. So that's a big aha for most of my clients.
And you get to a certain point and they can't unlock more. And using strategic debt, as we were talking about earlier, can do that. Do you think going from 500,000 to 5 million, that revenue growth becomes what they focus on and it hides profit problems or other issues or?
No, they have to be profitable in order to do that. Once they understand the components that go into making them profitable, it's pretty straightforward. My goal in the accelerator, which is 6 months, is to give them the tools they need. They could go from where they are to hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wow.
Because those are the essential tools that you need. It's not that hard once you understand them. But
Have discipline to apply the rules.
yes, yeah, that's it. The discipline part. Now we go back
Going
to some of
it's all full circle here.
It's-
Some founders have this ethos that you should just grow fast and fix the numbers later. I think I know what your answer would be.
So the folks that I work with are not, I do have IT people that I work with, but they're not the leading edge guys. Okay, they're not the guys coming up. Now they might be. I do have an AI app guy, but they're more Main Street people. Okay, they're providing a service with people. They're your plumbers or your electricians or your doctors, or they're manufacturing a product that goes into a car or goes into your eyeglasses. So the place where they can do that is when you're creating some kind of platform that you can't do without millions of dollars. Okay, so I have a new program for AI that will answer all your emails and sort through them. So number one, they have to prove it works. So they have to have enough in their budget to build it. And then they have to have enough to prove that it works by having other companies use it. And then they get dollars from the investment community to scale. Okay, that's a whole different kind of business practice. And there are millions of people who enjoy that gamble.
It is a gamble. So something like SaaS, it makes sense to just quickly grow, worry about the numbers and all the other KPIs later.
That's the rule. So all of that's the rule of 40. Do you know the rule of 40?
No.
Okay. I've always said my client should be 20-20. And it turns out that was brilliant because then I learned there's a rule of 40. And what 40 says is the 40 is two components, the percentage growth and the EBITDA margin. So when I said 20-20, I want you growing 20% a year, and I want you to have a 20% profit margin. In the investment community, that rule of 40 is if you are growing 60%, you can lose 20%. Okay, so there's an equation that helps with the growth and the profitability, because once you grow over 20%, you cannot be, unless you have additional resources, you're not usually profitable because most companies don't make 20%. And so you don't have the resources to fuel the growth. And so that's the tipping point. That's where I like to move my clients to. Not all, some of them are better than that. My consulting clients do better, but that's a pretty good rule of thumb. And that's where you see the investment community being willing to do these crazy things with money. And it's like, how can they do that? Uber's lost money the entire time it's been alive. But they're getting there.
Almost. Where Amazon for decades lost money. And then all
now
of a
they run
sudden,
the
it's
world.
like, look what we're doing.
Yeah.
Interesting. So this messy middle, 500,000 to 5 million in revenue, do you think it would be true to say that they're 1 quarter away from disaster? Or is it not that bad?
Disaster happens slowly. So they don't know it till it's too late, because what happens is they don't understand. So profitability keeps getting skinnier, and they can see that because they usually understand their financial statements enough to look at their P&L, their income statement, and they see they're making less money. So what happens is they go, I won't pay myself this year. But what they haven't identified is the fact that there's not the cash flow. They're having trouble making payroll. So not making payroll is the first red flag. Not paying themselves is the second red flag. And so it's slow because they exhaust all of their resources, and then they're like, what happens now? It's over. That's why it's the 82%. And it's a slow burn, and they just don't really know it. It's the frog in the hot pot.
They don't see the signs. They don't even know what they're going through. By the time they realize it, it's
too late.
It's too late.
So it just breaks my heart. It kills me. And so my Bamba alumni, we have hundreds of them. We've never lost one. Because once they learn it, and I don't want to sound like these aren't brilliant people, because they are. They have a profession where they see it. And they've been saying to their boss, we should do this, we should do this. And the boss he doesn't want to take any risks. He's not going to go, hey, yeah, let's try something new. So they leave that business and they start their business, and they love that. And they're doing the things they said they're going to do, and it's really exciting. But they've never learned how to run a business. That's not what they did. And so they go to their accountant. Okay, their accountant doesn't understand finance. Their accountant is taking historical numbers and putting it into their accounting system. Your accounting system does not help you. When you listen to a New York Stock Exchange company, you look at their financials, and then they have their quarterly call. Their quarterly call, if you listen to that, it doesn't look like anything like their financials, because they have taken their accounting financials and they've turned them into management financials where they're watching the important numbers. And small businesses don't know how to do that, because over here they have their operating system. Like I have a couple of spas and places, and they have a great operating system for spas. And over here's their QuickBooks with their numbers. When you get to be 50 million or 100 million or 20 million, depending on your industry, those two talk to each other. And the average guy who walks in my door pays me $127. And that costs me 62. Okay, I know what my gross margin is. But they don't know how to do that. QuickBooks won't do it because there's a bazillion industries. And so that's what we do sooner. And by having them understand all of those, what's your customer profitability? What's your lifetime value? What's your churn? Once you understand some of those now with laws on large numbers, you can start seeing, oh, I can make this decision. And so it's really not complicated, but it's not something you can sit down and learn in a day, because you have to see the iterations. You have to go, oh, connect the dots, because accounting is brilliant in some ways and complicated in others, because you have balance sheet, you have a cash flow statement, you have an income statement, and they all intersect in different ways, and understanding where and how that is not self-evident.
So it's looking at the numbers from an accounting perspective, but putting them in context. It's almost storytelling to fully understand what's going on in the industry, what's going on in the company, applying historical and then external factors, and then just having the entirety of it, rather than just looking at, here's our EBITDA and whatnot, right? Okay.
Yep. You look at it and you're like, there's my profit. But that's not really your profit, because you didn't collect all your revenue, because it's an AR. And oh, by the way, you have a term note, and principal is not part of income statements. So now you go to your balance sheet. Your balance sheet is actually your cash flow. And people go, what?
Would you say scaling from 2 million to 10 million is sometimes harder than just starting from zero?
If you've made the transition at 2 million, if you've figured out how it all works, then no, going from 2 million to 10 million is easy. If you haven't figured it out, if you're someone who has a lot of salespeople out there and you're 10 people, 6 of them are sales and 3 of them are operations, then you're going to hit that messy middle at some other point. One of the clients I worked with, this was a one-on-one client, she was at 6 million and she went to 22 in a year. And I was like, okay, she's, I don't know what to do. She worked with her husband and she was an accountant, but this is crazy. And so I said, okay, let's put things in order. She ended up, I said, you're going to have to hire a lot of people to get to this number. And they done really great. They had a really great business and they were pursuing some larger clients, but they hadn't landed any of them. And the larger clients watched them for a year or two and said, we love how you're working and we're going to give you a big job. 3 of them, all at the same time. And they're like, we expected 1 and then maybe 2 and then maybe 3. And so all of a sudden it hit and they're like, this is what we've been working toward. We're going to do this. So they had to grow very fast. They hired a headhunter. They got people in. And then the next year they went from 22 to 26 and they replaced some of those people. You're a warm body that knows how to do this. We'll hire you. But then it's, okay, we're going to get rid of these 2 guys and put someone in who's a professional. So when you have that kind of growth, you slow down. And then they went to 50 something the next year. So there are all kinds of spurts with how growth happens. But I do think once you've got 4 things, positioning, how you're in the market and what you price at, profits, you have to understand your financials and how things work, processes, which is everything from the first time you talk to a prospect till you lose them and churn and they sell the business and go somewhere else. So that processes is the entire process of providing your service or your product, and people who do the processes. So that's it. Once you get those 4 things figured out, you're good to go. That sounds easy, but
it
it's
sounds
not.
so easy. It does. Would you say you have a very high success rate in a space where there's a high failure rate? Would you say there's self-selection nature in that the clients who come to you realize, I can't do this on my own, I need help?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I have learners, people who want to keep learning. I have people who go, I don't know the next step. I don't know what my next step is. I have people who say they're stuck. I'm losing money. I can't make payroll. And so those are the red flags where I'm like, you're not gone yet. We can save you here. So yes, there's a self-selection process. But the reason I'm talking to you, I want more people to understand that this is possible. You don't have to go down the tubes all by yourself. And
having faced it yourself and figured it out a couple of times.
And the thing that's so sad is that with all of my expertise, my education, my banking, and the whole real estate experience, when I got to managing the golf course and the ski area and the hotel and the sewer and water plant, all those things, those operations, I started to learn things that I hadn't understood as a banker. I didn't understand where all those cash flow connections were. And I'm like, wow, if I haven't done it with all that experience, how would you expect someone who's really good at a professional position or really good at whatever it is they do to step into a business founder's role and know how to do it?
Interesting. So you've been on the commercial banker side from a lending perspective. You've also been a debtor with tens of millions of dollars on the line. Switching gears, what do banks look for?
That's a good question. Most of my smaller clients, I recommend smaller banks because I want them to build a relationship with their banker. And the banker wants to know that you understand what you're doing. And so presenting the numbers, even if the numbers are going in the wrong direction, saying, hey, look, I need some help. Your bankers are your advocate to the bank, so they need to understand your information. And they're there to help you. What do bankers need? They need solid numbers from 2 or 3 years. They need you to understand the numbers, and they need you to have a forward plan. Why do you need this money? What's it for? What are you doing? I'm growing. I need working capital to grow. because I need to hire some people because I have more jobs, I have more work than I can afford to do with my existing staff. Or I need to buy this kind of machinery so I can do this faster and produce more. So they need to have a mission. And then when I was training bankers, the baby bankers, where I was like, I hate asking questions to my client because it sounds like I don't know. And I'm like, it's the exact opposite back to questions, right? We're back all the way back to questions. They want you to ask as many questions as possible because the more you understand the business, the more you're going to be able to look at their numbers with your financial hat on and tell them, looks like you're going to run out of cash. It looks like you might be over levered. It looks like you might want to turn this into a term loan instead of a line of credit because you used your term loan improperly for this piece of equipment. You didn't know that that should have been termed out. So they should be your advocate for you. And the more they understand your business, the better they're going to be able to serve you and the faster you're going to be able to grow.
To find that right fit. Are there top reasons, and you may have already touched on this, but are there top reasons that founders are unlendable?
Yes, because they get bad advice. Accountants, their job is to make sure that you're telling the story to the IRS correctly, okay? And so they like when you don't have to pay taxes. So lots of accountants will say, go out and buy that fleet of trucks, okay? And so you have $400,000 and you go out and spend it. Now you don't have the cash flow you need to run your business. And you've got loans from Ford, but you're out of working capital, okay? So that's number one. You spend all the money. The other thing that happens is you have founders, I have no money, I don't have anything to leverage. The other side is I leave all my money in the company, okay? Now that would be lendable, but now you're like, but that's my money and I don't want to commingle with funded money, okay? So I've got $2 million in equity. I don't want to borrow $1 million because then is it mine or theirs? And it's like, that's not how it works. That's not how to think about it. It's on the balance sheet. It's a liability, equity liability. And so you have to pay that part back. It's not commingled funds, but in their minds, it's all in their operating account. I'm like, number one, take it out of your company and put it into something else so you can build your wealth at the same time you build your company. And number two, borrow it rather than using your money. So those are the two places where I see companies being unlendable. And then if they're not profitable, there are a number of resources available to them that they don't know about. And so that's very frustrating because there's factoring, which is great for a number of businesses. There's all kinds of CDFIs, community development finance institutions, that lend to restaurants and startups and companies that are not yet bankable. So there are all kinds of resources. But I think that's one of the great things that we do at Goldman Sachs is we really give them a whole avenue of resources available to them that most business owners don't know about.
So it's almost like you stair step, use the tools at the stage of your business. Yep. And you may have touched on this again, but is there like one red flag where lenders are like, we're not touching this?
Bankruptcy. And there are some industries that banks don't like. Fashion, because you're planning for the spring and the winter, and it's so off market. Restaurants, because they fail even more than small businesses. There are some industries that are really hard to get banked at a commercial bank.
What is the one financial metric that 90% or the majority of business owners ignore that they absolutely should not?
Accounts receivable days.
That lag.
How long?
Yeah.
You say you have 30 days. Mm-hmm. They're actually collecting them in 60, and they're getting crunched, and they don't know it. And no one likes collecting accounts receivable. It's not fun. You're calling your clients and telling them they're deadbeats. Yeah, that's not great news.
Probably number two to raising prices is you also don't want to call your clients and say, hey, buddy, where's my money?
Yeah.
So is that one of the things you focus on fixing, one of the key things that you look at with new clients?
It's not where I start. Where I start is trying to have them understand what's profitable and what's not, because that's the engine. And when they're profitable, they're creating accounts receivable, and now they have to collect them.
So Bomba, obviously, business owners, MBA, you're doing a great service to those people in the messy middle. Why do you think there are people out there who perhaps they're in the position where they're in the messy middle and Deb has this wonderful company, but they don't make that step to ask for help or to be educated?
Yeah, it frustrates me.
Yeah.
I did that seminar with Tony Robbins on AI, okay? Because I'm learning AI. It's really interesting. And they had a big pitch that there were 6 elements you needed to run your business, okay? And just what you would expect. So I told them, I said, I don't understand how the person who's telling you how to successfully run a business, right? I put him as one of the great gurus. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
But numbers are not part of it. He has nothing in any of his teachings about financials. Nothing about financials. If you buy an EOS facilitator and you go through their 2-year program, each quarter you meet with them and they say, what's your goal? What's your revenue goal for this quarter? And you can tell them any damn thing you want. I had a guy who made had a revenue of $2 million a year. And with his EOS guy, he told him, I'm going to make $1 million this quarter, or I'm going to revenue $1 million. And then they worked all their numbers out from there. First of all, you've never made $1 million every 2 quarters, and you've never had a profit in the 8 years you've run your business. So you're working on the wrong things. And it's very frustrating to me that all of these big programs that are out there do not teach numbers. They teach things that will help you have better numbers, but if you started with the numbers, because there's nothing you do in business that doesn't have to do with numbers. And EOS will tell us what your revenue goal is for the next quarter. And I'm like, pick a number. I mean, throw a dart. Why is that not a relevant thing to teach them how to do that? And look at their numbers and look at the trends and ask, how are you going to do that? Frustrates me.
Very frustrating. Interesting. Going on that same vein, why do you think so many smart entrepreneurs avoid their financial statements? Because it all boils down to that. You can't tell a story and grow.
You want my theory?
Yes.
My theory is they're smart and they're embarrassed because they can't say they don't know something. Okay?
So basic, yeah.
I really, truly believe that. So This is what I'm telling you, all my stories. It's funny because it's Olympic time, right? Okay, so the 1972 Olympics were in Sapporo, and Barbara Ann Cochran won the slalom. She won the gold, and then her son was racing and won the silver this year and at Cortina. And someone broke their leg. I wasn't named to the team to go to the Olympics, but someone broke their leg, and so the U.S. ski team sent me a ticket. And I land in Japan, and I collect my bag of skis with 6 pairs of skis.
Oh, wow.
And my suitcases and all my U.S. ski team stuff, and I'm dressed in all my U.S. ski team stuff. And I'm in Japan. Now, back in the dark ages, we didn't have translators everywhere. We didn't have
the signage that they do now.
No, we didn't have Olympic villages. The Olympics were held during the 2 weeks of the World Cup. So these 2 weeks during the World Cup is when we had Olympic races and we got the gold medal. But it wasn't the same brouhaha it is now. So I get to the airport and there's nothing there. Go to the Olympics that way. Where's the ski area? Who knows? So I'm like, okay, I can't read anything. That's how I think these business owners are. They don't understand it and they don't know how to ask. I didn't know how to ask. I did what any 15-year-old would do. I piled everything in the middle of the most busy part of the airport with all my U.S. ski team showing, and I sat on it and I cried. People came over and they helped me. They're like, can we help you? And I'm like, do you speak English? Yes. I'm supposed to be on that mountain skiing in the Olympics, and I don't know how to get there. And I have a $100 bill. Okay, how useful is that? And so there were like 3 or 4 of them helped me get my stuff to a bus, and they explained to the bus driver what I needed. And everyone on that bus let that bus driver drive me to the mountain.
Oh, wow. So if you extend that analogy, you're saying the business owners who are asking for help are the ones crying.
Yeah, but they shouldn't. They don't
It's a
know.
call for help.
And they don't know it's okay not to know because they know everything else. But when you think about marketing or managing, those kinds of things you can do trial and error. But the financials, how they put together, is complex. Once you get it, you go, this is easy. And it's not complex math, but unless you know the secrets, it doesn't make any sense. And they look at their financial statement and their P&L, because I don't like losses. I call it an income statement. They look at their income statement and they see they've made money, and they're like, I made money. And it's no, you didn't, because you didn't collect the money.
As going on your earlier point, a lot of these founders came from companies and they focused on the business side or the actual servicing side, if you would, but not on the business components. And they don't even realize what they don't know. They don't know what they don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's an even better way to put it.
Interesting. This has all been insightful, and I want to finish on something that I rarely see in the founders and CEOs. They're typically 365 days a year into it. Not that you aren't, but you, for years now, I understand, have had the fortitude or the smartness to break away for half of the year and be on a sailboat. How do you do that? And at what point did you do that? How long have you been doing this?
That was always the plan when I retired from banking. I wanted to go back on my sailboat. And so I built the curriculum, the Bomba curriculum, actually teaching people in Vermont how to run their businesses. So that was a silver lining from other disasters. And so I taught, when I came back here and went back into work at the bank, I taught the curriculum. So it was a year-long program, and I took 10 business owners, and we met every month, and I went through a curriculum, and it's a workbook. And in 2019, I decided I was going to retire. That was my retirement date from the bank. And so I thought, I'm going to put this all online so I could teach it from the boat. I didn't have a boat anymore. We'd given away the other one, and so I had a new boat I wanted to buy when I retired. And so I put it all online, and in 2019, it was all online, and I got my 10 people together, and they're like, oh no, we don't want to do it online. We want to get together and meet. And so we went back to meeting in person, and then COVID happened.
Like you saw it before anyone else, but you were set up for it.
I was. And so since then, what I learned is that 1 year is too long for small business owners. So I've doubled down on a 6-month program, which has been much more successful. And I have coaches that work with me, and we're ready to scale. We're ready to do a little more. I probably have about 100 clients a year go through the program. We're ready to do more than that. But yeah.
I was just trying to understand the whole balance, because everyone talks about work-life balance.
Sailboat.
Yeah.
So in theory,
you're still working.
I am still working.
Yes.
But in theory, I talk to clients, and I have my classes, and I have my one-on-ones with them Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Okay.
And that's bled into Monday afternoon and
Right, as it does.
Friday mornings. But that's the goal.
Okay. You're doing this now 6 months out of the year on the boat.
Yeah,
right?
I do it
Still
on the
running your
boat.
business.
I grab my little Remarkable. Everything's online. And I have people across the country. So it's fun because I do a lot of speaking, and I'm in Virginia, and I'm in Texas, and I'm in California. So it doesn't matter.
Interesting. Do you feel like, last question on that, do you feel like that makes you better positioned to scale? I'm not just talking from a tech basis, but I'm talking about take a step back, change your environment, and kind of cleanse.
Yes. And as one of they call them scholars in our Goldman Sachs program in the 10 KSB, I'd been on the sailboat through the summer, and getting off the sailboat, up and down the companionway to pack the car and get things off and get the boat ready for winter, because in the winter you're not on the boat, it's cold in Virginia. And the deadline was I had to be back to teach. We drove. So I get up in the class and I tell them, I said, I am really sorry, but I want you to know that I am really, like, my legs hurt, my butt hurts. It was really hard packing up the boat and getting here. So I'm really stiff. So I'm going to be sitting rather than walking around a lot. And the whole group of them just looks at me and goes, oh, you had trouble getting off your boat. They're like, we want to be you. Okay. And so
no sympathy.
But there's something about that, because I am personifying the fact that when you scale your business correctly, you have the time to do those things that are important to you.
You can buy the freedom.
And so it's a great metaphor or a great example of what you get once you get to that point.
I love that.
And they get to that point a lot faster than they think they will.
I love that. Last question, I want to focus on Business Owners MBA. What can you say to the founder, to the executive who's out there on the fence, afraid to ask for help, what can you say to them to get them to come on board and get some advice, whether it's from your program or others? You're industry agnostic.
We build business owners profitably. We teach them to be profitable and to scale. And it takes 6 months. Sometimes we have a tail. If you want to stay for the year, we have a little tail to keep. As I said earlier, it's iterative. And so you may not see the whole picture in the beginning, but then as you start to pick up the secrets where money's stashed or where money's leaking, within a year, you'll be able to do it yourself. And then once you can do it yourself, now you can hire someone. A lot of companies will hire a fractional CFO, but that fractional CFO is running your company, whether you know it or not, because they're telling you what they know how to do, but they're not signing paychecks. And so you have to understand it before you can get the right person.
Interesting. Deb, thank you for this. The proof is in the pudding. You've 4 in the top 100 and several in the top
4, yeah, it was
5,000.
probably more than, I don't know now.
Numbers don't lie. So you've definitely
it's fun.
done it. And thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. This was great fun.
This was a great conversation. Thank you.